Minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from Florida for yielding. I want to talk a little bit about the legislation and then the rule itself. It's not unusual that we're at a difficult moment near the end of a session and have must-pass legislation. And the main portion of this legislation, the National Defense Authorization Act, is actually very good and very bipartisan. Frankly, it was passed out of committee with overwhelming vote, both sides of the aisle. We all know that the chairman and the ranking member, two of our most distinguished members, they worked very well together. And like anything in a $500 billion bill, I can quibble with this or that, but the reality is I favor the legislation, have no problem supporting it, and the rule that moves it forward. I also want to agree with my friend, Mr. McGovern. I have the same concerns he does about the authorization for military action, and jointly signed a letter with him to that effect. Look forward to continuing to work with him to that effect, because he's precisely right that we need to address this. I think the appropriate way is a full authorization debate, not an amendment, but my friend certainly states his case eloquently. We also have a major lands bill appropriate with this. Most of that bill is really pretty non-controversial. Most of it went through committee or a lot of it across the floor. And there's a lot of good things in there and things that I find very easy to support. There's a particular portion, however, that I do oppose. And this is Section 3003, as I recall. But it's basically a copper mining issue in southeast Arizona, where we have two Indian tribes that have sacred sites in this area on what is now federal land, and they've opposed this legislation. Now, this legislation was debated on this floor instead of legislation and then pulled because the votes were not here to pass the legislation. So we're passing by rule a bill that the majority in this House did not support. Fortunately, the bill is somewhat different. There are a couple of things that have been added. A consultation with the tribes in question, a stronger environmental review. Whether this is window dressing or sincere is hard to know. But I'm going to urge the tribes in question to use the consultation fully and aggressively, and I'm going to urge the federal agencies that are responsible for the environmental considerations here to be extraordinarily aggressive in their oversight. We do have a trust responsibility when it comes to sacred sites on federal lands, or non-federal lands for that matter. We have a governmental responsibility. Now, this is a bill, remember, that did not make it across this floor. And it's never been considered by the United States Senate on the floor. Frankly, if that bill couldn't make it across this House, I very seriously doubt it would have made it across the floor in the Senate. So we really have the rules, in a sense, I think, thwarting the majority opinion inside the Congress. And that is unfortunate. However, speaking personally, when you serve as a member of the majority on the Rules Committee, and I was given extraordinary latitude last night to try and change this rule in a way that would have stripped this particular provision, and was allowed and did vote against the rule in committee. When you're given that responsibility, once the committee makes its decision, you also have a responsibility to accept the decision that's been made. I also have the great privilege on my side of the aisle as serving as a deputy whip, and that usually requires that you support your party, which is pretty routine on procedural matters on both sides of the aisle. 12 years, I've never voted against a rule that my own party put on the floor, even if I had disagreements with it. And I do have disagreements. But in the end, I'll support the rule with reservations, hope that the provisions that are in the law, to be fair to the authors that have been added since that legislation, will give us some avenues. But I think we ought to reflect long and hard over using this kind of procedural mechanism in this way. On our side of the aisle, we would like to think we are going to be a different kind of Congress and have been a different kind of Congress. And we can always play the back and forth. We've got plenty of gotchas for the other side in terms of how they used rules when they were in the majority. If we're going to do things differently, it needs to start someplace. So I wanted to come down here, highlight this as, I think, a mistake, but make it clear at the end of the day, I support the rule that the committee arrived at, but I'll be looking forward to working with my friend on his particular concerns on authorization. I'll be looking forward and really watching this issue in Arizona with a great deal of concern, and I will continue to push aggressively that we change the manner in which we operate. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back my time.